The fall the late afternoon sun poured a soft golden light over the alien orchard. Tall trees swayed gently in the breeze, their branches heavy with glowing fruit that shimmered like small lanterns. John was walking along the narrow dirt path. Between the trees, a small basket in his hand. He was just a human farmer on this distant colony world. Far from the busy trade ports, life here was slow, quiet, and peaceful until today. He had just bent down to pick a fruit when a sharp sound cut through the air. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was a scream, high-pitched and frightened, followed by the violent cracking of branches. John's head snapped up, eyes searching the treetops. There, about 20 feet above him, something small and fragile was tumbling down. The sunlight caught silver hair for just a moment before the figure hit a thick branch, bounced, and kept falling. Time slowed in John's mind. He dropped his basket and ran forward, but he was still too far. The small body struck the ground with a soft thud, fruit scattering around her. John stopped a few feet away, breathing hard. It was a child, but not a human child. Her skin was a pale green, smooth and delicate. Her hair was long and silver, spilling across the grass like liquid light. Two thin antennae twitched weakly on her head. Her eyes, when they blinked open, were the brightest emerald green he had ever seen. She tried to push herself up, but winced and let out a soft whimper. From the other side of the orchard, voices rose, alien voices, sharp and hurried. Several of her people appeared, dressed in long robes, their faces filled with shock. But instead of rushing to help, they stopped a few steps away. They looked at her, and then at John, and then, strangely, they stepped back as if afraid. Hush! John glanced between them and the child, confused. Hey, she's hurt, he called out. None of them moved. One of them whispered something, the word carried on the wind, touch law. Another hissed, don't go near her. The child coughed weakly. Her small hands trembled against the grass. John took a slow step forward. The aliens murmured louder now, some shaking their heads. But he couldn't just stand there and watch. She was a child, and she was in pain. He knelt beside her. Hey. It's all right, he said softly. She blinked at him, her gaze cloudy but searching. Help. Please, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. John didn't think twice. He slid his arms under her small frame. Feeling how light she was, she flinched at first, then relaxed against him. Burying her face in his chest, a gasp rose from the gathered aliens. One of them dropped his basket of fruit. Another turned and ran toward the village, shouting words. John couldn't fully understand. The child's silver hair brushed against his chin as she clung to him tighter. John stood, holding her carefully. What's wrong with you people? He said, his voice low but angry. She's hurt, and you're just standing there. One alien stepped forward, his expression grim. Human, he said, in halting English. You have broken the law of touch. John stared at him. What? The man's eyes flicked to the girl in John's arms. You cannot touch a child, not your own, he said slowly. It is forbidden. Dangerous. John looked down at the little girl, who was trembling harder now. Her fingers gripped the fabric of his shirt, as if letting go would mean the end. She whispered into his chest, Don't let them take me. The alien man raised his voice. Put her down. John shook his head. Not until she's safe. Two robed figures broke away from the group and started toward him. John stepped back, his eyes darting between them and the narrow path that led deeper into the orchard. The girl's breathing was fast, uneven. He didn't know what the law was or why they were acting like this, but his gut told him one thing. If he gave her up, something bad would happen. A bell rang somewhere in the distance, a deep, metallic sound that rolled over the hills. The aliens froze, then began speaking in rapid bursts. The words meant nothing to John, but the tone was clear. Something had been set in motion. Something bigger than just him holding a child. The girl looked up at him then, her green eyes wide and wet. "They'll come now," she whispered, her voice shaking. John frowned. "Who?" She swallowed hard. "Hunters," before he could ask what she meant. One of the robed aliens pointed at him and shouted. John turned and started moving, his boots crunching on the grass. The girl's small weight felt both fragile and heavy. In his arms, behind him, the voices grew louder, angry, accusing. He didn't look back. Somehow, he knew that from the moment she fell from that tree and he dared to hold her, his quiet life on this alien world was over. Asterisk, the touch that changed everything. John didn't stop moving. The alien child clung to him like a lifeline, her small arms wrapped tight around his neck. He could feel her shallow breaths against his collar. Every step he took seemed to echo in the stillness of the orchard. But behind him, the stillness was breaking. Voices rose, sharper now, faster, urgent. The rustle of feet in the grass told him the others were following. They were careful at first, keeping their distance. But then a deep metallic bell rang again, the same sound he'd heard before, and suddenly their pace quickened. The child stirred against his chest, whispering something in her language. He didn't understand the words, but the fear in her tone was clear. Two robed aliens broke into a run, closing the gap. "Stop." One shouted in broken English. John turned halfway, keeping his body between them and the girl. "Why?" he demanded. "You touched her." The alien growled. "Now she is marked. And so are you." The girl's fingers dug into his shirt. John didn't know what marked meant, but every part of him told him it wasn't good. The two men didn't try to grab her, not yet. Instead, they formed a loose circle around him. As if waiting for something, he shifted his stance, eyes darting to the gaps between the trees. He knew the orchard's winding paths better than most traders. If he could break their line, maybe he could lose them. Then, from deeper in the orchard, more figures appeared. This time, not in robes, but in armor, polished plates covered their chests, and long spears rested in their hands. They moved with the cold precision of soldiers. The lead guard stepped forward, his voice like stone. "Human," he said. "By touching the child, you have taken a place in the right of claim." John frowned. "I don't care about your rights," he said. "She's hurt. I'm taking her to get help." The guard's eyes narrowed. "You will take her nowhere. She is now bound to you until the right is complete, or until the bond is broken." The words made no sense, but John could see in their faces that they believed them, and whatever this bond was, they seemed determined to control it. The girl looked up at him then, her voice trembling but clear. "If they take me back, I will not live." That was all John needed to hear, without another word. He stepped toward the nearest gap in the circle, his shoulder dropping low as he pushed through. The guard shouted, but he was already running. The girl's arms tightened around his neck, her cheek pressed against his shoulder, branches slapped against his arms, and the glowing fruit brushed past his face. The shouts faded for a moment, but then a new sound came. It was low, like a distant growl. It vibrated through the ground, sending a chill up John's spine. The girl whispered a single word, her voice sharp. "Hunters." John didn't ask, he just ran harder. He darted down a narrow path, his boots slipping in the loose soil. The orchard stretched endlessly ahead, rows of trees bending into shadows. But he knew where he was going, a small, forgotten place he'd stumbled on weeks ago while exploring. Behind him, the growl became a roar. It was closer now, mixed with the sound of heavy boots and snapping branches. The air seemed to grow colder. The girl's small body trembled against him. "They can smell us," she said in a shaky whisper. "They will not stop until we are found." John's legs burned, but he didn't slow. He spotted the old irrigation tunnel ahead, half buried in the dirt. its entrance hidden by a fallen tree. He ducked under the low branches. Forcing his way through, the opening was barely wide enough, but he squeezed inside, the child still in his arms, inside. It was damp and smelled of earth, thin beams of light. Cut through cracks in the ceiling, John crouched low, catching his breath. The girl kept her face against his chest, her small hands clutching him like he was the only thing keeping her alive. He listened. The shouts were distant now, but the growling was still there. Moving through the orchard like a predator circling its prey, John leaned back against the cool wall of the tunnel. "What's happening?" he asked quietly. She pulled back just enough to look at him, her green eyes wide. "They will never stop." She said, "You touched me in front of the village. The law says that makes you my protector. But to the council, it makes you a thief." John stared at her. "I didn't steal you," he said. "I know," she whispered, "but they will not care. They will take me back. And they will kill you." Her words sank in like ice. John glanced toward the tunnel's entrance, where the sunlight was fading into evening. He knew the orchard would be a trap once night came. He would have to move again soon, but for now, the shadows inside this tunnel were the only thing between them and whatever the hunters were. The girl leaned against him again, her breathing slowing. John's mind was racing. He didn't understand the laws, the rights, or the bond they spoke of, but he understood one thing from the moment she fell. Their lives had been tied together, and no law, no guard, and no hunter was going to take her from his arms. Flight through the orchard, the tunnel felt safe, but John knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The girl had stopped shaking, though her hands still clung to his shirt. Outside, the orchard had grown quieter, but not in a comforting way. It was the kind of quiet that meant danger was close. The air felt heavier, the light fading into deep orange as the alien sun began to set. John shifted the girl in his arms. "We have to move," he whispered. Her green eyes flicked toward the tunnel's entrance. "They will be waiting," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "That's why we won't use the main paths." He let her out slowly, keeping low under the fallen branches. The orchard stretched before them, endless rows of tall, glowing fruit trees. Their leaves swayed in the wind, casting strange shadows on the ground. Somewhere far off, a faint horn sounded again. The girl tensed. "They are calling more." John kept to the narrowest rows, his boots crunching softly in the grass. Every so often, he paused to listen. The hunters didn't shout like the guards had. Instead, they moved in near silence. It made them harder to track, and harder to avoid. They slipped between the trees, sometimes doubling back to throw off their pursuers. John's mind was working fast. He knew the orchard well enough to find places where the trees grew so close that even a hunter in full armor would have to squeeze sideways. Those tight spaces became their allies, buying them moments of quiet as they passed an old storage shed. The girl tugged at his collar. "Wait," she whispered. "Look." John turned his head. Through a gap in the leaves, he saw them, 3 hunters, tall and broad, their armor black with a faint red sheen. They were scanning the ground, their strange helmets clicking and humming. One of them bent low and ran his clawed hand across the dirt, sniffing the air. John's chest tightened. "I can smell us," she whispered again. "They will not stop until they find us." John guided her back a few steps, their bodies pressed against the trunk of a wide tree. He waited until the hunters moved further down the path before he led her in the opposite direction. The orchard began to change here. The fruit trees gave way to wild, overgrown vines and twisted roots. The air was cooler, the ground softer. "Underfoot this way," he said, keeping his voice low. For a while, it seemed they had escaped the immediate danger. But then a sound broke the quiet. Not the low growl from before, but a sharp crack, a branch snapping under weight. John froze, the girl's breath hot against his neck. Another crack, closer now. He turned his head slightly, and his stomach dropped. A single hunter was standing less than 30 feet away. No horn, no warning, just there. Watching, its head tilted slightly, the faint red glow from its eyes fixed on them. John didn't think he ran. The girl held tight, her small legs curling against his side. Branches whipped his arms and face. The glowing fruit blurred past him. He could hear the heavy, even footsteps behind them. It wasn't sprinting. It didn't have to. It was stalking, confident it would close the distance. John veered left, diving through a gap between two massive trunks. The bark scraped his shoulder, but he kept going. The hunter's armor clanged faintly as it followed. The girl twisted in his arms to look. "It's only one," she said breathlessly, "but more will come." They burst into a clearing, a small patch of open grass with a shallow pond in the middle. The water reflected the last of the orange sky. John didn't stop. He splashed through the pond, the cold water soaking his boots. On the other side, he spotted a narrow trail hidden under drooping branches. He ducked into it, the girl's silver hair brushing the leaves above. The path wound downhill, the air smelling of damp earth and moss somewhere behind them. The hunter's steps faded, but John didn't relax. If there was one thing he understood about predators, it was that they could appear again without warning. They finally reached an old stone wall, half covered in vines. John crouched behind it, setting the girl down for the first time since they'd fled the village. She wobbled but stayed on her feet. "You shouldn't carry me all the way," she whispered. "It will make you slow." He shook his head. "I'm not leaving you behind." From above the wall, they could see part of the orchard again, and the faint, ghostly shapes of hunters moving between the trees. "They'll search all night," she murmured. "They won't rest." John looked at her, the faint glow of the fruit trees lighting her face. Her eyes held fear, but also something else, trust. It hit him then that she had no one else. Every other person from her village had stepped back when she fell. Only he had stepped forward. John tightened his grip on his old utility knife. He wasn't a soldier. But tonight, that didn't matter. As long as she stayed with him, he would find a way through this orchard alive. Secrets in the dark. The old stone wall gave them cover for a little while. John kept his back pressed against it, his eyes scanning the orchard for any sign of movement. The girl stood close beside him, her small hands gripping the edge of his shirt. The hunter's shapes moved in the distance, their red eyes glowing faintly like embers in the night. The alien sun had slipped below the horizon now, leaving only the dim glow of the orchard fruit to light the world. "Come on," John whispered. "We can't stay here." He crouched low and led her to a narrow, hidden path that wound in two. The deeper parts of the orchard, the air here was cooler, heavy with the smell of damp soil and leaves. The silence pressed in from all sides, broken only by the sound of their breathing. After a few minutes, they came upon an abandoned shed, its wooden walls weathered and cracked. John pushed the door open slowly, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside, dust hung in the air, drifting through the thin beams of moonlight that slipped. Between the boards, the place was small, just enough room for them to sit and catch their breath. He set her down gently on a crate. In the quiet, John finally spoke. "All right, kid. I need to know what's going on." She looked at him, her green eyes reflecting the faint light. "You wouldn't believe me," she said softly. "Try me," he replied, his voice firm but calm. The girl hesitated, her fingers twisting in the fabric of her dress. Then she said, "I am not just any child. My father sits on the High Council." John blinked. "A council?" She nodded. "They rule our people. Asha. And someone wants my father to suffer." John crouched in front of her, his hands resting on his knees. "So, you think someone pushed you out of that tree?" Her lips pressed together. "It wasn't an accident," she whispered. And when you caught me, everything changed. He tilted his head. How? She looked down. In our law, if a stranger touches a child from the high families, it creates a bond, a protection bond. Her voice grew quieter. You are now my protector. The words sat heavy in the air. John sat back. I didn't agree to that, he said. I know, she replied, but the law doesn't care. And neither do the hunters. John rubbed a hand over his face, trying to piece it together. So, those armored things out there, they're not just after me for breaking the law. She shook her head. They are after both of us. If they kill you, the bond breaks. If they take me back, the council will decide my fate. And it won't be mercy. A faint scratching sound made John freeze. He motioned for her to stay quiet. The sound grew louder, slow, deliberate, moving along the outer wall of the shed. John's hand went to the utility knife on his belt. The girl's eyes were wide. Following his every movement, the scratching stopped. Then, a faint, metallic click echoed from just outside the door. John stepped back from it, keeping the girl behind him, through the thin gaps in the boards. A faint red glow moved past. One of the hunters was close. It paused near the doorway, as if listening. John held his breath, the girl's small fingers gripping his arm tight. After a long, tense moment, the red glow drifted away into the trees. Only then did John let out the breath he'd been holding. We can't stay here, he whispered. They'll sweep this whole place before morning. She nodded quickly. There's a place, she said, an old shrine beyond the orchard. No one goes there. John narrowed his eyes. Why? Because it's cursed, she said simply. He gave a faint smirk. Sounds perfect. They slipped out the back of the shed, keeping to the deepest shadows. The girl led now, guiding him along hidden paths only she seemed to know. As they moved, John couldn't help but glance at her, this tiny, fragile-looking child who carried secrets bigger than the whole orchard. And somehow, without meaning to, he had been pulled into them. In the distance, the orchard glowed faintly under the alien moonlight. The hunters still moved like dark shadows between the rows of trees. But John had a feeling they weren't just chasing prey anymore. They were hunting something that could change their laws, maybe even their world. And in the middle of it all was him, a simple human farmer, now bound to protect the one alien child no one else dared to touch. The hunters arrived. They moved through the orchard's darker side, where the trees grew closer and the glowing fruit barely lit the ground. The air was cooler here, heavy with the smell of damp earth and leaves that had fallen long ago. John kept his steps light, following the girl as she guided him along winding paths. Her small hand gripped his wrist, as if letting go would mean losing him forever. The alien moon hung low, its pale light filtering through the canopy. Somewhere far behind them, a horn sounded low and deep. Carrying through the night air, the girl stiffened. That's not the village bell, she whispered. That's the hunter's call. John slowed, listening. The sound faded, replaced by something far more unsettling: silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind where every animal hides, where even the wind seems to hold its breath. He scanned the rows of trees, his eyes straining in the dim light. A faint vibration passed through the ground under his boots. Then came the first sign, a red glow between the trees. Moving slowly, another appeared to the left, and another to the right. They were spreading out, closing the distance from three sides. The girl pulled at his arm, urging him toward the far end of the orchard. But John hesitated. If they ran blindly, they'd be herded exactly where the hunters wanted them. Instead, he ducked into a thick patch of trees, pushing branches aside until they found a narrow hollow under a massive trunk. They crouched there, the smell of moss and wet bark filling the air. Through a gap in the leaves, John saw them clearly for the first time. The hunters moved like shadows wrapped in black armor. Their helmets smooth and without faces. The red glow came from a single slit across the front, brightening and dimming like a slow heartbeat. They carried long weapons, spears tipped with something that shimmered faintly. Each step they took was deliberate, almost silent. The girl leaned close to his ear, whispering so quietly he barely heard her. They are not soldiers. They are executioners. John didn't respond. He kept watching, counting their movements. One passed within 30 feet of their hiding spot. It stopped suddenly, tilting its helmet toward the ground. John's chest tightened. The hunter crouched, running its clawed fingers over the soil before lifting its head again. It spoke in a low, mechanical growl, the words unknown but dripping with finality. Two others joined it, and together they began moving toward the far orchard wall. John exhaled slowly. "They didn't find us," he whispered, but the girl shook her head. "They will. They can smell the bond the moment she said it." A sharp crack split the air, a branch breaking somewhere to their left. The hunters froze, then moved with sudden speed. Their armor whispering against the leaves, John knew they had seconds. Before the area was surrounded, he grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the back of the hollow and into a narrow deer path. The trail was uneven, roots snaking across the ground. But they didn't slow. A heavy thud echoed behind them. One of the hunters had landed from a jump. The girl gasped but didn't look back. John's breath came hard now, his legs burning. The path dipped sharply, and they stumbled into a clearing lit faintly by the alien moon. They were trapped. The clearing was small, with thick tree walls on every side. And from those shadows, 3 hunters emerged. John stepped in front of the girl, his old utility knife already in his hand. It was small compared to their weapons, but it was all he had. The tallest hunter spoke, its voice deep and even, human. "Release the child. Your life will end quickly." John's grip tightened. "Not happening," he said. The hunter tilted its head, as if curious. "Then your life will end slowly." The one on the left moved first, stepping toward them with silent precision. John's heart pounded. He shifted his stance. Keeping his body between the hunter and the girl, she pressed her hands together. And for the first time since they met, a faint green light began to form between her fingers. John glanced back. "What is that?" "Protection," she whispered. But only once. The hunter lunged, its spear flashing under the moonlight. John sidestepped, shoving the shaft away with his knife hand. The girl's green light burst outward in a sudden wave. It hit the hunter square in the chest, sending it skidding back several feet. The other 2 froze, their glowing visors flaring brighter. The girl swayed, her energy spent. John caught her before she fell. The hunters hesitated for only a second before moving in again. But from somewhere far off, another sound cut through the tension, the ringing of the council's high chime. The hunters stopped instantly, heads turning toward the sound, without a word. They stepped back into the shadows and disappeared into the trees. John stared after them, his pulse still hammering. The girl's voice was weak, but steady. "They've been called back. But they will return." He looked down at her. "Then we'd better not be here when they do." The hidden truth, the alien moon had risen high by the time John and the girl reached the far edge of the orchard. The hunters were gone for now, but the silence they left behind felt dangerous. John kept glancing over his shoulder, expecting to see that red glow return at any moment. They followed a narrow trail that curved through a cluster of low, moss-covered hills. Here the air was damp, the ground soft underfoot. The girl leaned against him, her step slowing. "You're hurt," John said quietly. She shook her head. "Just tired. I used too much energy back there." He guided her toward an old, leaning structure at the base of the hill. It looked like a storage hut, its roof sagging, walls cracked from years of weather. Inside, the air smelled of dry leaves and dust. John sat her down on an overturned crate and knelt in front of her. "All right," he said. "I've carried you through this orchard, fought off armored killers, and now I'm hiding in a shack that might fall over. You owe me some answers." The girl looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable in the dim light. Then she nodded. "You know, I'm from a high family," she began. "But you don't know what that means." Her voice grew quieter. "My father is not just a council member. He is the keeper of the law of touch." John raised an eyebrow. "The same law you said I broke." She nodded, "Yes." "And that is the problem." John leaned back slightly. "Go on." She took a deep breath. "The law was made long ago to protect children of high bloodlines. If a stranger touches them in need, a bond is formed, a protector's bond. That person becomes tied to the child's life, and the child to theirs," her green eyes fixed on his. "If one dies, the other changes." John frowned. "Changes how?" Her voice trembled now. "The bond shares more than life. It shares memory, strength, and in some cases, bloodline." He shook his head slowly, trying to process it. "So you're telling me, because I picked you up, I'm now magically connected to you for life?" She nodded once. "Yes. And that is why the hunters were sent." John's jaw tightened. "They're not just after me because of the law, are they?" "No," she said. "They were sent by someone who wants the bond broken, and the only way to break it is to kill one of us." Her words hung in the air like a cold shadow. John leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Who?" She hesitated, then whispered, "My uncle. He wants my father's seat on the council. If I disappear, my father will lose all power. And if you die, I will be left unprotected, easy to take." John felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This bond can't be undone. She shook her head, not without death. The wind outside shifted, carrying the faint sound of movement. John stood quickly, peering through a crack in the wall. For a moment, he thought it was the hunters again, but the shapes in the darkness were smaller, moving slower. Villagers? They carried lanterns and whispered to one another, scanning the ground as if searching for tracks. The girl's voice was low but urgent. "They will tell the council where we are, and when the hunters return, they won't stop." John turned back to her. "Then we move before they get here." She looked unsure. "There's only one place they won't follow us." "Where?" "Us." "The shrine," she said, "beyond the orchard. They say it's cursed, but I think the curse is just a story. The real reason no one goes there is because it's tied to the old protectors before the law was changed." John studied her face. She believed every word. "All right," he said. "Then we head for the shrine." Before they left, the girl reached into a small pouch tied at her waist and pulled out a thin, metallic pendant. It shimmered faintly in the lantern light, leaking through the cracks. "This will hide us for a short time," she said. Placing it around his neck, he felt a strange warmth spread from the metal into his skin. "It masks the bond's scent," she explained, "but only until sunrise." John nodded and pushed. The door opened slowly. The night air was cool, the sound of the villagers' voices growing louder somewhere to their left. He motioned for her to stay close as they slipped into the shadows. Every step toward the shrine felt like walking deeper into unknown territory. Behind them, the faint hum of the hunters returned. They were back, and this time, John knew they wouldn't be called away. The shrine stood at the far edge of the orchard, half hidden by tangled vines and ancient stone. Moonlight washed over its cracked steps and weathered pillars. Carvings of strange symbols lined the walls, faded by centuries. John paused. At the base of the steps, the girl's small hand still gripping his. "Here?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "The hunters won't step on sacred ground unless ordered. But if they do, it means they've been given permission to kill." The air felt heavier here, colder too. John led her up the steps, the wood creaking under his boots. Inside, the shrine was empty except for a tall, worn statue of an armored Kiss, of an armored figure holding a child in one arm and a sword in the other. The stone eyes seemed to watch them. The girl whispered, "The first protector." The one the law was built around. John didn't answer. He was listening. Far off in the orchard, the sound came again, that low hum that crawled under the skin. The hunters were here, and this time the sound didn't fade. It grew louder. Joined by the crunch of boots on grass, the girl's grip tightened. "They're coming," she whispered. John looked around the shrine for anything useful. He spotted an old spear mounted above the statue, its blade dulled but still solid. He pulled it down and tested its weight, heavy but manageable. A shadow passed across the entrance, then another. 3 red glows appeared in the doorway. The lead hunter stepped inside without hesitation. Its voice was low, steady, human. "Release the child. You have one chance to leave alive." John stepped forward, the old spear in his hands. "Not going to happen." The hunter tilted its head slightly. "You are bound to her. You will die for her. Is that worth it?" John's eyes didn't waver. Yes. The other 2 hunters spread out, their spears raised. The girl stepped beside John, her small hands glowing faintly again. "I can help," she whispered. "But it will drain me completely." John glanced at her. "Then we save it for the right moment." The first hunter lunged. John sidestepped, driving the old spear across its chest. The blow didn't pierce the armor, but it forced the hunter back a step. The second came in from the side. John blocked. The clash of metal ringing through the shrine. The girl raised her hands, sending a thin wave of green light toward the third hunter. Slowing its movement, they pressed forward. The sound of boots pounding on the stone floor. John fought with quick, desperate strikes, using the spear to keep them from getting too close. One caught his arm, the blade slicing through his shirt and into his skin. Pain flared, but he gritted his teeth and pushed back. The lead hunter spoke again. "You cannot win. The bond will end, and your death will be painless if you surrender." John spat blood onto the floor. "Painless sounds boring," he said, his voice low. "I'm here to end you." The girl's glow grew brighter. "Now?" she shouted. John stepped aside as she unleashed all her energy. A blast of green light surged through the shrine, slamming into the hunters. The force cracked the stone floor, sending dust and shards into the air. The 2 hunters on the sides were thrown back against the walls, their armor sparking. The lead hunter staggered, but didn't fall. Its red visor flared bright, the sound of its breathing sharp and fast. John didn't wait. He drove the spear forward with everything he had. The old blade slipped into a joint in the armor, deep enough to make the hunter drop to one knee. The girl swayed and collapsed to the floor, her glow fading. John stepped over her, keeping the spear between them and the hunters. The 2 who'd been thrown back began to rise. But the lead raised a hand. They froze. The hunter's voice was quieter now. "The bond is stronger than the law. We will not break it tonight." They turned and left, their red glows fading into the orchard. Only when they were gone did John kneel beside the girl. Her breathing was shallow, but she opened her eyes. "They're gone?" she whispered. "For now," John said. She gave a small, tired smile. "Then you're still my protector." John smiled faintly back. "Looks like it, outside." The first rays of the alien sun touched the shrine. The orchard was quiet again. But John knew this was far from over. Still, for now, the girl was safe, and as long as he lived, she always would be.